First, I'd like to introduce Hossein Jalali of Virtuleap and Antonio Giacomin of Fluido. And today we have the pleasure of talking about some very interesting new companies that these two individuals are working with from separate countries, but surprisingly similar. And I'm going to let them get into it, but very briefly, both of these individuals are working on figuring out how to incorporate brain training and understanding the brain to help the elderly with various preventative measures. So I'll let them explain it a bit better. So if we can start with you, Hossein.
Thank you. So we started Virtuleap around a year and a half ago. Initially, it wasn't brain training at all. It was more about creating an ad network for VR. But essentially, we moved away from that, and we saw that there's so much data that the devices provide, so why do we want to focus on elements on the screen? We were going to focus on the person himself, and we started bringing neuroscientists and trying to understand if we can figure out people's moods just by all the elements that these devices provide. For example, the Oculus Go has 16 nodes that it tracks on a frame per second, and we wanted to see what we can take out of that.
So when you mean moves, can you be a little bit more specific?
So we wanted to see if we were able to track if a person is showing excitement, if the person is showing sadness, and figuring out if there's some relationship between these on different levels of different applications, and we can see that regardless of what there are, where they're playing, this person is showing this type of reaction. We never continued that for multiple reasons. One of them because it really based on application. It wasn't something that you could just say, this is a general formula that works everywhere. And then we looked at it into, okay, we have all this information. There's all this great stuff that can be taken out of a VR. So let's look at what we can build with it. And that's where we got into creating brain training games. And that's, if you probably know the 2D versions, the applications, the mobile versions are Lumosity and Peak, are brain training games. We're trying to build that on a VR and utilize the advanced capabilities that VR offers, including being immersive and also all this information that it tracks, and that's what we're...
Lumosity is like the mobile app where you're playing these brain games on your phone to keep up your memory or essentially improve your skills in one form or the other. And essentially, you're trying to do this in a virtual reality space.
And yeah, and because of that, we could add additional things like spatial audio, generally, you know, spatial orientation in general, in a sense.
Amazing, thank you. Antonio?
Good afternoon. My project is similar to his project, but it starts from a different point of view. I started with a couple of years ago during the Christmas Eve when I had the chance to let an older person, to try VR, and I saw this reaction in the being in somewhere else, being in a different place. And then we started with this project. We had this intuition and said, why don't we try to make something connected with the old people, but also with people with dementia.
What was the reaction that you saw when they put on the headset?
Smiling, and was the wow effect. So it was like, wow.
It's kind of a little bit different than when adults put it on, but similar to a child, would you say?
Yep, yeah, almost the same. And the project started with this simple idea. Just try to make this a sort of therapy. And obviously, I'm not. My background is not medical. I'm not a doctor. So I create a group with doctors and neuroscientists, and we started to investigate how to use VR and recreate memories, or recreate connections between the person with dementia and the family and the caregiver. So our aim is not to put the headset on a person, old person, just left them there just in a funny Disneyland or world or whatever, but to create a connection between the persons and with VR. The process, we create a process and the protocol that starts outside VR, then continues in VR, and then obviously finished outside with a very strong connection with the people.
So a little more storytelling involved in this process, would you say?
Sorry?
Storytelling, a little bit more, yeah.
The storytelling is the most important part, because you start the process. The whole process is based on storytelling. That starts from memory transfer, memory connection of the person that will be in virtual reality, and then we're trying to recreate these memories inside VR in a sort of real time, but we have some patterns. We are working also, we are researching, we talked before, also with machine learning and AI to define the patterns and then recreate this in a sort of real time. And then let the person inside this experience, and then talk about the experience, share the experience that the person with dementia had in
Amazing.
VR.
Hossein, so what are you hoping is going to come of this? What is the goal? What is the ideal scenario with this when it is launched?
So our long-term goal, I'll start with the short-term. Obviously, the short-term goal is to create an opportunity, just like we need wellness for our body, create wellness for the brain. As the 2D version started, we kind of feel that we have a lot of advantage compared to them, and I think I give you this example. We like to give this example. It's not necessarily exactly direct, but it's a matter of if you have a mobile application that you're playing a juggling app, even if you're the best juggler in that application, you have no learning of juggling. But in VR, if you're playing a juggling application, there's a bigger chance that you can learn juggling faster. That's our whole goal, is to create an opportunity to create wellness. But ultimately, the long-term goal is for us to grab so much data and information and put it into machine learning and AI. And we say, like, okay, we noticed that in this elderly person, he's been playing this game for quite some time. He's been doing really well on our memory games, always reaching high levels, level 8, level 9, and then suddenly he's on level 2. And there's a reason he's there. But from our point of view, it's already too late. What we want to do is grab so much information from prior people who went through the same process, find patterns and say, okay, this person actually is going through a pattern that's showing the same curves as someone who got Alzheimer's. And so we can say in the near future, in 1 year, in 2 years, there's a chance, because he's following his pattern, that this could happen to him. That's our ultimate goal. It's something that we have to do a lot of research on, a lot of studies on, and a lot of testing on, but that's the ultimate goal.
That's great. So unlike most people in tech, you want to use data for good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what is your short-term goals, long-term goals with this launch?
Well, we start at the end of September with collecting data. So we are in a very early stage. We defined a sort of protocol, a medical protocol. So it's all supervised by doctors. So the process is we collect all the data, and then we'll discover in 6 months the results before and after the use of VR as a storytelling method to connect with persons with dementia.
And so in 5 years, 10 years, how are you seeing people use this, and how do you hope it helps them? Or still unsure, it's an unknown.
Because the technology is so fast, so it's very evolving. Right now we have headsets that 1 year ago were like science fiction, and right now we have new tools, AI and machine learning. They're developing a lot, evolving.
So although both of you are somewhat in preventive medicine, you are trying to address issues before they happen, identify them before it gets to be too big of an issue, there still is always a risk when you introduce new technology into healthcare. How have you dealt with that? How have you kind of made sure that you're doing everything possible to keep it as risk-free as possible? And obviously it's not going to be completely safe, but how have you addressed that issue?
So, yeah, in our case, we involved the medical centers and the neuroscientists, because we are creative technologists and we have no knowledge about the response of the body and the mind. So we define which sensor, which elements are important to control, and also we define also which type of dementia we have to deal with, because dementia is a very complex thing, and so we have a protocol we define as like 3 months of working only on the protocol, only papers, just to understand which is the right way. Then maybe it's not the right way, but we have to work in progress also to define also from the results, from the data. So I think it's the same for you.
Yeah, exactly. We started off like from the early stages, we were making sure that we have cognitive scientists, neuroscientists on board who are like every step of the way that we think is correct, they kind of like review it and make sure that it is possible. Beyond that, for example, we're working with the American Association of Retired People, AARP, and they're going to be our launch partner to get this going. On the other hand, we're based in Portugal, so there's a chain of hospitals called the CUF hospitals, and we're actually going to be testing a lot of what we're saying with them prior to going really big. We're going to really go through clinical trials and making sure that what we're saying works and it doesn't create side effects, because as much as we're growing, VR is growing as well quite fast, and we have to be on top of what we're creating. What we're building on a device today, tomorrow could require rebuilding on a new device, and there's a reason new ones come out, and we have to study them and see what was wrong there and what's happening here.
Great. And both of you are obviously working with people in the medical field, the healthcare industry, neuroscientists, but are you working with anybody else? I know you're particularly invested in storytelling, so have you brought in certain creatives? And you're in gaming, so have you talked to certain gamers to figure out how you can kind of bring multiple people from different fields to kind of make sure that you are covering kind of all your bases?
Yeah, VR and XR, immersive technologies, are connecting all these fields, different fields, from medical to storytelling to creative artists. But we try to not to go too much into the art, not to be too artistic, but to understand which are the needs of the person that's creating the memory. So it's sort of memory creative tool.
So much more like personal, individual case than a overarching, here are the stories for this group of people. Cool. And what about you?
So we take the gaming part as seriously as we take the health part, if you could say. But we do always look at it from a perspective that this is scalable for a larger audience of people. So we try to keep it as simple as possible and as fun as possible. At the end, there needs to be some gamification to get people, rewarding people who come in on a daily basis. We add those elements, obviously, on it to get people to come and train every day. We do provide statistics to them that are in a nice format. We just don't do comparisons between individuals. It's always about you and yourself, who you are today, who you were before, and who you want to be. So there's no comparisons between people. And what we try to help and we try to focus on is not to get people to try to play over and over things that they're good at, but rather work on the ones that they're not. So we have some methods to implement those by providing the workouts ourselves rather than letting them play, although they can always go and play those.
And you both are starting with a certain demographic, and it makes complete sense why you would start there. Do either of you have aspirations to expand to other age groups? You mentioned juggling, and that is such a easily understandable way to describe this product. And I could see in the future how other people could benefit greatly from this in the gaming space and in diagnosing maybe other issues with people that aren't kind of on a certain age bracket. So have you thought about that, or is that just thinking too far ahead?
So If you look at the current 2D versions or the application mobile app versions, they're really focused on the younger generation, and it's because, you know, it's much more accessible. You're sitting on a couch, you can start playing on your phone. For you to actually use the VR, you have to put a little bit more effort. You have to be more dedicated to implement this. We're not looking at it from the B2C market as much as they are. We actually look at it more from the B2B2C in a way that we want to work with organizations and helping their community. But obviously, we will focus on the younger generation who also are now understanding that wellness is not just body, it's also mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Say we're more B2B and connected with realities that has this problem. So associations and clinics and retirement homes and all these realities that has this, they need a tool for the caregivers and for the families to connect with persons with dementia.
Nice, and I've had your similar experience where I've shown virtual reality to, you know, grandparents, and they have a very similar reaction. I'm curious, though, has there been any resistance to introducing this new technology for either of you two, and how have you kind of overcome that? How do you explain that this is not just some new gimmick or some new toy, that this really can help you and affect change?
So if you look over the past year, we see a lot of articles coming out regarding senior citizens using VR for different aspects. Loneliness, it could be for, you know, doing things that they would have wanted to do and they never got the chance to. So we see that there's a lot of people who are actually paving that way for us, and they're actually getting pretty good reaction towards VR. So it seems like, although there is a learning curve, there's a lot of people out there who are going to be using this device who haven't even used a computer. So it's going to be, you know, there is a process of creating the culture, creating the understanding, creating the usage, but we're quite up for it, and it's been positive till now.
Yeah, I think the person that you have to convince is the doctor. So right. And the presentation are just put the headset on. You can't explain VR. You have to experience it. Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, I wanted to also mention, like, you know, you open up a computer for my grandparents. I open up a computer. There's just too much to do. When you put on the VR headset, they immediately get the satisfaction, the sensation. So the process of introducing it, I think, is even easier than a computer.
And before I open it up to the audience for any questions, I know you're both very new, but when do you hope to be kind of launching with this, and, you know, how can we look out for this in the future, just to follow it?
I think we're going to publish in 6 months the results.
And that's Fluido.
Yeah, and then we start to spread the protocol, because you can use it on every headset.
Right.
So we're going to be launching a beta version in September on the Oculus Rift for sure, and the Quest we're in discussions. And then for a period of time, we're going to be grabbing data, but also we're going to be focusing on building more library of games and eventually expanding to the other devices through the PlayStation Store and Valve and so on.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? Well, I guess with that, we'll head out of here. Thank you guys so much. This is really compelling stuff, and it's been a great honor to meet both of you in the past 2 days and see what you're both doing.
Thanks so much. Thank you.